So, yeah, before we talk about Sisu and whether we liked it or not,
Yes.
I want to talk about the writer's strike. Now, Riley, you've said multiple times in our conversations that you don't know like anything about it.
Well, I know that it's happening, and I know that it's
Mm-hmm.
impacting just because of the nature of headlines and how
Sure.
saturated the internet is with Marvel
With
stuff and
news
Netflix
and
stuff. I
yeah.
know it's impacting a lot of upcoming movies. Like, for instance, I know the Blade movie has been put on a
Yes.
freeze because of the writer's strike. I know that the writer's strike has impacted are we 4 or 5 of Stranger Things? But I know Stranger
Hmm.
Things has been impacted. So some of those bigger ticket items, I know they're halted. But
Yeah.
in terms of how the writer's strike is going, even really the motivations behind the writer's strike. Is it wages? I don't really know. I don't know the
Yeah.
background to it, and I don't know how it's going.
Like most strikes, it's about wages. It's about fair pay, essentially. But it's not, and that is not surprising. To me, what's interesting is what leads up to the strike. So here's a little quiz for you.
Okay.
How many scripted TV and movies, like scripted TV and movie productions, how many of those do you think started this year alone? If you had to guess a number.
Oh, well, I would have to think thousands upon thousands.
It's not that many. It's not that many. It's 500 this year,
Only
give or take.
500 new shows and movies?
Okay, yeah. So it's interesting. 500 doesn't seem like a lot because we're like living in a glut of TV and movies and all this kind of
Yes.
stuff. 10 years ago, kind of right before things like you took off with streaming platforms.
Okay.
What would you guess? How many would you guess started in 2013? Maybe
Well, see, I,
2012.
I would almost guess the same thing. Like, now there's a lot more streaming shows and movies being
Sure.
produced, but at the same
But
time, I
just
feel
anything
like
scripted, anything that needs writing, not
but
reality TV.
I feel like if you go back to 2013 or even earlier, I
Hmm.
feel like for TV shows alone, there was so many new shows at least being piloted a year.
Yep. Yep. Well, the number is 250. So it's essentially doubled.
Okay.
Now that those like on the face of it, it might not seem like that much, but their argument is that we are seeing so many new productions, so many new TV shows. You guessed thousands. It
Yes.
feels like thousands. They have not had any wage, or they've had very little wage increases. Their wages have stagnated like most other industries. But that's one part of it. It gets a little bit more complicated when you start to think about like the mechanics of the industry and how
Okay.
streaming has changed that. So, Seinfeld. If you got a job writing on Seinfeld, you were well looked after. You were a staff writer. You would be employed for a long time because the episodes were 20, or the seasons were rather 20 episodes. They
Yeah.
were very long. Nowadays, you get like 10 episodes because they are, that's just the nature of the platforms. They do shorter form content, and they are using talent that is used to making movies. They like shorter commitments. All of this is from a couple of articles that have been written by
Yes.
the New York Times and a couple of podcasts that I've listened to about it. But basically, back then, you could make a living as a middle class writer, as a staff writer somewhere,
Yeah.
or make a living as you would essentially be middle class. You weren't like Shonda Rhimes, but you
Yeah.
were still making a living. Their argument is that that doesn't happen anymore because you would write essentially for 10 weeks on a 10 episode show, and then that's it. You have to go find some other job. Okay? That's kind of crazy. That seems to only have come about in the streaming era. And this this podcast talked about this first big streaming TV show. What would you think that is? If you had to think about it.
First streaming TV show.
Yeah, like first TV show that released all its episodes on one platform all at once.
Well, okay, that would have to be a Netflix show.
That's a good guess. That's a good start to the guess.
I'm trying
You're
to
right
think
about
what
that.
it would be though. I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue. Help me out here.
Kevin Spacey is in it.
House of Cards?
Yeah.
Was that actually the first?
It was before Orange is the New Black, which was the second big one.
Also, House of Cards. Shout out to House of Cards. What a phenomenal show. And I'm
10 out
saying
of 10
that
show. It's
I'm
very
saying
good.
that setting aside Kevin Spacey.
I was
I
gonna
know
say, you
there's
take him
issues
away.
there.
Yeah, he's a bit of
Wow.
a bit of a wild card. But yeah, no, it's House of
You're
Cards. That was
you're
the
right
first
though.
one.
Because I actually kind of remember that.
Yep, it was. It seems like so long ago, but it really wasn't.
Yeah.
And since then, it's been a complete overhaul of the industry, and people kind of said that would happen, though, right? Like I feel like I was hearing those conversations. Maybe I wasn't as plugged into the scene in grade 12 or whenever that was, but
So kind of
Yeah.
what I'm hearing in regards to how the writing, how a career as a writer is changing is it's really less of a long-term career on a show and more so it's a commodity business where you're picking
Yeah.
up multiple shows and writing on it.
yeah,
And
it's like a
that's really
gig
interesting.
economy.
Well, yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then so there's that. So there's that side. The industry mechanically is changing for writers.
Okay.
The other side of it is residuals have completely changed. If you know the term for how it works with.
Well, I've heard that for actors because I remember there was Sydney Sweeney of all people who
Mm-hmm. yeah.
stars in Euphoria. She talked about that where these new actors who are going on Netflix shows or streaming shows, the residuals aren't the same. It's not like
No.
you're
not like
hopping
Big
in
Bang
on
Theory.
Friends or The Big Bang Theory where you have a hit show and you're set for life. Granted, you're still going to make a lot of money and you're gonna unlike writers you're gonna have the opportunity for sponsorships, brand deals, and make a lot more money that way, but the residual business
Yeah.
much different now.
Very much so. It's the same. You described how it is for actors. It's the same for writers. So, what would the residuals? Their argument is the residuals would essentially keep you afloat as you were, moving between projects, and it would maybe give you time to take time off and create your own project. So yeah, that's another aspect that's changing. And then the final aspect that was like the most interesting to me is that now writers are kind of siphoned off in the writing room. They're not usually asked to come on and to produce. And this is shout out to Jacob Colin.
Okay.
He was on the podcast. Jake Colin? I can't remember exactly. Sorry if you ever watched this. But this guy was talking about how he interviewed Michael Schur, the creator of The Office and Parks and
Okay.
Rec.
Okay.
So he when he was writing for The Office, he got to do a lot of different things. He got to learn how to sound mix. He got to learn how to do set design. He got to learn how to do to work with actors on set. He got to do all of these things that then allowed him to go off and help or create more projects. And he basically learned all of these things. That's just not the case now. As a writer, you're in and you're out. You don't have a lot of input. So it's just really it's kind of wild. I just thought it was really important to highlight some of this stuff because everybody watches TV shows. Everybody watches movies. We talk about movies.
Yeah.
It's, writers are important and, people are talking about, maybe AI, generative AI could replace them, but like it's just not, it's not going to happen, at least in our lifetimes, I don't think. You can't take out the soul in writing.
Well, but what's the solution here? Is the solution regulating greater residuals for streaming shows to
Maybe
help out with that
renegotiating it.
aspect?
Maybe. But then
Okay.
so maybe they make it so like how like YouTube pays people by like watch time and click through rate and stuff like that. Maybe they
Yes.
look at doing something like that. So if you're attached to a Netflix project, you get paid out a little bit every time somebody clicks on your show and watches it. I don't know though. It's kind of weird. They hold all the power in a lot of
Oh,
ways.
definitely.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
Because really, the only people who are still hanging on traditional cable and satellite TV are older generations. And I mean, even my parents who are middle aged, they've said bye bye satellite TV and they're fully on streaming platforms. And that's how they consume all of their content. Like,
yeah.
it's how we consume media now.
It is. It's just a fact of life. So looking forward, in one of the podcasts that I listened to, the question was like, okay, well, is the golden age of good TV and movies, is it gone? And their consensus is no, it will always exist. Like there will always be good shows, there will always be good movies. One interesting thing that this guest on the podcast noted was when there was a writer's strike in the 90s, that is when there was an explosion of reality TV because they didn't need writers for it.
Okay.
Specifically, he pointed to the Celebrity Apprentice that got created during that strike. And so that was, everybody knows Donald Trump's involvement in that. So it's just interesting, it adapted. So I don't know what we'll see with this, but that was an example of what happened.
I think right now, especially with the streaming era, we're getting some of the best TV shows that have probably ever come around. And yes, they're shorter form. Yes, they're 10-episode shows, but they allow for such tight and well-written packages. Like I think of shows, House of Cards. I think of
True Detective,
Fleabag, True Detective. Like there's all these excellent shows.
Succession.
Or Succession, which I haven't watched, or now I picked up Dead Ringers on Amazon Prime, and I'm really enjoying that right now. There's, or I've started watching another show, Swarm, which is like it's a horror and another fantastic show.
Yeah, there's no end to it. There's no end to it, and so that's where it's like, okay, we're really lucky to have all this content. I really hope that they're able to negotiate some sort of compromise here. It seems like they're very far apart on the spectrum right now, like for needs and what each side wants. So I haven't really talked about, because the streaming companies do have like a side to the story.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's really worth talking about, because like really it just is like they're kind of hoarding this like cash. That's all it is. Their argument is they're not really making a lot because they target growth at all costs, like grow the subscriber base, like dump money into productions like Amazon, like dumping like all that money into Lord of the Rings. Not that it was bad or anything, but it was like a TV show that cost like millions of dollars per episode to make. That did not happen before streaming. And then there's like an arms race between the companies, and that it gets more complicated. And really at the heart of it, it's like these people just want more fair pay, and they want to be able to make a middle class living by writing.
I mean, maybe there's also a conversation to be had about actors and their role in these shows, because you can't be an actor or an actress or be involved in these shows without good writers, and your show or your product or your movie, whatever you're making, won't have longevity without good writers. And I think of situations where, well, take The Last of Us. Pedro Pascal was making $600,000 per episode, or there's other shows like I'm pretty sure with The Big Bang Theory, the guy who plays Sheldon Cooper, he was making, I think, $500,000 per episode, or maybe it was up to $1 million per episode. But you hear about these crazy numbers, and maybe there's just a conversation to be had about awareness of your place in the industry and distributing some of that wealth. Because how many writers are there on a show? Some shows there's going to be a lot, other shows there's only going to be a few. But can you redistribute some of that salary that is borderline obscene to other people to help out your production crew?
Yeah, I love to know what the economics are in their minds. Like, it really is like writing is the foundation of everything for a show, unless it's reality TV. So I don't know why the talent gets more. Like, I understand why the talent gets more in a way, but like, it's like, to me, it just seems so backwards.
But it's the same. Well, it's the same conversation with really capitalism. Period. It's like true. you find those companies where the CEO is walking away with millions, but yet their employees are on minimum wage, which minimum wage today it's not a living wage.
No, it's not.
So rather than taking millions away or getting millions of dollars in bonuses, redistribute that to up some of the other people's wages. It's that classic issue.
Yeah, it really doesn't end.
No, and I don't purport to know the answer, but I just think it's an interesting question where the the success of your show really does hinge on how well the characters and the story is written, as much as it does of a good performance.
Yep.
You need both, but
Well, just as
without
much as
good
like good
writing.
direction and good
Yes.
cinematography and all that kind of stuff. Like it's a team effort. Like $1 million episode of a TV show does not get made by one person.
No.
So this is just one piece of the puzzle. So anybody watching this, do a little bit more research into the writer's strike. It's very interesting, and there's there could be some big things that come out of it. So it's good to stay informed.
I'm excited to see where it actually ends up and what kind of change we see from this strike.
Yeah, well, especially even just like what projects get canceled or shelved. Like my understanding is that like soap operas will be able to run for like another like maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
Everything else, and because they they have so much material, but everything else is the daily shows and late night shows, they're all off air right now. They went dark. Like Meyer's
already?
Late Show. Oh yeah, they went dark last week.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
See,
'cause they-
here I was just thinking that Phase 5 of the MCU or whatever, when that was hanging in the balance,
Nope.
that was the big stakes for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't even know
kidding.
that half of it.
No, I'm just kidding. On that, I don't care about that.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see these knock-on effects. But with all that
Well,
being said,
Yeah.
what are your final thoughts on that?
Just having this conversation with you, it really opens my eyes to some of the bigger issues, and even just learning that late night shows are being
Mm-hmm.
canceled. I like SNL. That must probably be canceled because
it's-
I know
yeah,
the
it's off
writers'
air.
room in that is insane.
Well, it's like
because
20 people.
yes, it just shows how important writers are to this. And I think if you're going to be running a successful show or a successful film industry, you're going to have to make some concessions
You gotta
here.
respect them, right? And by proxy, without them, you wouldn't have us. So,
Oh, exactly.
really, we could go back and review old movies, I guess, but who wants to do that?
It's the butterfly effect or the trickle down effect, whatever you want to call it.
It really is. Yeah, Ashton Kutcher's gonna bust through this door here, and I haven't watched Butterfly Effect, so I can't.
I just
can't
know
even
how it
consider that.
ends.
You just know how it ends.
Yeah, I've never seen it either.
Okay, well, all that being said, we are going to talk about Sisu